And now, the Rink Rap podcast from Forever Blueshirts, talking all things New York Rangers hockey. Here's your host, Jim Cerny.
What's up, Blue Shirt faithful? I'm Jim Cerny. Welcome to the Rink Rap podcast here at Forever Blueshirts. I want to start off by first thanking you for liking and subscribing and tuning in, and certainly following what we do over at foreverblueshirts.com and all the content we put up over there. But most specifically to this podcast, thank you so much for joining us once again this week. Got a lot of great feedback from our guest last week, Colin Stevenson, who joined the show. And, you know, we got into some really, really important topics right before, 24 hours or so before, the Rangers did it again. Letter 2.0, second time in 8 years, Rangers raise the white flag on a disastrous season and say we got to retool the roster, so we're going to reset, rebuild, whatever word you want to use. That's what the New York Rangers are going to do. They went public with it last Friday, and it's so interesting. So much of what Colin Stevenson and I spoke about the day before on the podcast really came to light and fed into why the Rangers are raising the white flag on the season, why they're doing a roster reset, retool, whatever, whatever terminology you want to use. So it's great timing there. And speaking of great and guests, we've got a great guest coming your way in just a little bit. Dave Pagnotta of the Fourth Period will join us. Dave's certainly tapped in, information about all 32 teams, not just the Rangers, but the entire league. He's well-sourced, well-connected. And so he and I are going to talk about Rangers trade strategy, what happens moving forward, what are some of the key rumors, and just breaking down how things are going to go moving forward for the Rangers now that they've decided to, as I said, raise the white flag on this season and look ahead. It's now about the future, the moves that they make here ahead of the deadline, into the off season, how they continue to restructure their roster as they basically say no mas for this season, because the Rangers have not proved worthy of being buyers at the trade deadline, that's for sure. So in turn, they'll be sellers. And in fact, their star player, Artemi Panarin, their star forward, their leading scorer, each of the past 6 seasons and into this season, his 7th with the Rangers. He's again leading them in scoring. They've told him no contract extension is coming, and they're going to work with him. He's got a no-move clause, of course, as we've talked about, and they're going to work hand in glove with his representation and try and send him somewhere that he'll waive his no-move clause for. So they're starting right at the very top and working their way down, and you would hope if they're going to do this, do it right. No stone should be left unturned, and the Rangers need to get after it. Right? If you're going to do this, do it in New York City. Do it for the second time in eight years. Well, guess what? You better be open house on everybody. I'm not saying trade Igor Shesterkin. I wouldn't trade Igor Shesterkin. I don't think anybody's even going to make them an offer for Igor Shesterkin, who, by the way, also has a no-move clause, not to mention a monster contract that goes on for 7 more seasons after this one. But really, anybody else on that roster, even guys with no move clauses like Zibanejad, Miller, you got to listen, see what other teams are willing to offer, and then see what you can do. If it's realistic or not, to move veteran guys, younger guys, they got to retool the roster. You got to get younger, you got to get faster, more north-south skaters, and finishers. Put the puck in the freaking net. What are they now? 5th, 6th lowest scoring team in the NHL. That's with Mika Zibanejad having, a resurgent season. And that's with Artemi Panarin at a point in a game pace. 5th or 6th lowest scoring team in the NHL. So yeah, guys that can put it in the net, roster depth, organizational depth, man, they got a lot of work to do. But I'm going to start with the story. Or actually 2 stories rolled into one, right? People remember where they're at different times. So 8 years ago, when the Rangers called that press conference and they sent a letter out to the fans, talking about rebuilding. Rangers had gone through a pretty good stretch in the 2010s, right? They've been to the 2014 Stanley Cup Final. They've been to 3 Eastern Conference Finals in 12, 14, and 15. Won the President's Trophy in 2015. Like, there was a lot of success there for quite some time. But management recognized, hey, this thing's starting to go south. Henrik Lundqvist is getting older. Yeah, we got to do something here to the roster. You know, the pipeline was basically non-existent. Not completely, but it was pretty non-existent of prospects. Rangers, hadn't had really any high draft picks for a number of years. They kept trading them away, kept chasing that Stanley Cup. Never quite got that championship. So they did an innovative thing in 2018, and they sent the letter to the fans, and they were transparent. They said, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is our plan. It's going to take a little while. Bear with us, because what we want to do is get this right, build up our infrastructure, our NHL roster, our organizational depth, our prospect pool, so that we can be a sustainable team, a successful, sustainable team for years to come. All right, you all know that. You know that they did it. Jeff Gorton was the GM then. James Dolan backed this, what ended up being a successful PR move by them, because the fans embraced it. They said, well, you know what? We've had this success. You recognize we're not going down the right path, and you're going to do something about it, and you're being transparent about it, right? You're not bullshitting us. Okay. That was good. That was 2018. So part of the story is, where was I that day? I was actually at the Prudential Center. I was working for Sporting News at the time, and I was working on some stories. So I was at Prudential Center. They had a game that night. The Devils did. So I was there. And of course, news breaks. I get the email from the Rangers, the letters in there. Then Gorton's going to speak. And I'm like, all right, here we go. So I wrote a couple stories that day from the Prudential Center about the New York Rangers and this move, this really unheard of move, going public with what their plan would be. So I wasn't there. I wasn't at home, where I could, really absolutely absorb everything. No, I in the chaos of Prudential Center, I'm writing about the Rangers across the Hudson River with what was going on. Fast forward 8 years. Now, here I am, work at Forever Blueshirts, all things New York Rangers all the time. So when the news broke on Friday, I wasn't sitting by my laptop. I was in my car. I was heading down to Princeton, New Jersey. I'm going to broadcast be part of the ESPN Plus broadcast of the Princeton women's hockey game that night against Harvard. In fact, I did the game the next day on my birthday, I might add. Talk about troopers, professionals, grind it out. Fourth liner, that's Cerny. On my birthday, I'm broadcasting Princeton hockey. Not bad, huh? All right. Anyway, I digress. And yes, it really was my birthday last Saturday. But this was Friday. Driving down to Princeton, I was on the phone with Pat Pickens, longtime friend, a guy that I worked with at NHL.com, used to write for New York Times, and he writes for AP. Real hockey guy. We were finalizing a conversation that ended up with him joining us here at Forever Blueshirts on a freelancing basis. So excited to share that news with you. He wrote his first story the other day, and he's got many, many more in the pipeline coming up. So really happy to welcome him to the family. But again, I digress. When we were done with that call, and yes, it was hands-free, all good. My hands were on the steering wheel. I was safe, not taking any risks here. After I was done on the phone call with Pat, I put on the radio in my car, and I'm bouncing back and forth, toggling back and forth between WFAN and ESPN radio in New York. And they're going over the big news of the day. While I'm on the phone with Pat, I find out Mets have signed Bo Bichette. Massive signing, less than 24 hours after they were beaten out for Kyle Tucker. All right, that's big news. John Harbaugh looks like he's going to sign with the Giants as head coach. This is last Friday. Big deal. I mean, wow, the sports news breaking all over the place. And then they said, oh, yeah, now on top of it, the Rangers did it again. I'm like, oh, shit. What did they do? What did I miss? What do I have to do now? So the Rangers, another letter. I call it the letter 2.0. They're going down that path again. So anyway, I had to find a diner. It's Jersey after all. I was in Jersey. Wasn't that far from Hobie Baker Rink or the Princeton University campus. So I had time, still had several hours before had to be in the arena. So pull off, side of the road, go to a diner, fire up my laptop, get their Wi-Fi and get to work. Here wasn't the Prudential Center, but again, I'm in somewhere in Jersey when the Rangers release a letter signaling their intentions to raise the white flag, and here's what we're going to do moving forward. Anyway, so those are my stories about, where I was and how I wasn't, right by my computer, right in a perfect position to cover what was going on, but still did it anyway. So the Rangers now, moving forward, if they're going to do this, and they stated their plan, it's got to go beyond Artemi Panarin and Carson Susie. Right? Those two guys are both, unrestricted free agents at season's end. You got to get something for them. They've already told Panarin he's not getting a contract extension. What I found surprising by that was not so much that decision, but was Brett's reaction to it. When he finally met with the media Saturday in Philadelphia, Panarin seemed surprised, shocked that there was going to be no contract extension forthcoming. This after failed negotiations earlier in the season. Panarin still believed, at least this is just me reading it, because listen, Panarin did not say a lot. So you really have to read through things and the tea leaves, if you will. But it seemed like he was really surprised that this was their decision. Or maybe the timing of the decision, whatever it was, he seemed surprised. And hurt, sad, wistful. I don't know what the right other adjective is for how he felt. Again, he didn't say a lot. But it's clear he didn't expect it. That meeting with Chris Drury. But yet, here we are. Here he is. Here we are. Okay. So the Rangers, they made that decision. They tell Panarin. And then, of course, Carson Susie is an unrestricted free agent at season's end, too. Whatever you can get for him, you're going to get for him. You're not going to hold on to Carson Susie. It doesn't matter who's playing left pair. Earl Vakanainen can step in. Connor Mackey can step in, come up from Hartford, whatever. Braden Schneider could move from right side to left side. So Scott Morrow then could play on the right side once Adam Fox does come back. There are ways to work around it. It doesn't matter. You're raising the white flag on the season anyway. You're going to miss the playoffs for the second season in a row. So Susie goes. Panarin goes. So reportedly, Rangers talked to all the other guys that had trade protection in their contracts. So that would be Captain JT Miller, Mika Zibanejad, Vincent Trocheck, who's got a 12-team no-trade clause in his contract. Will Borgen, who somehow has a complete no-trade clause in his contract. Oh, man. I digress again for a minute. If the Rangers learned anything from that first retool that they did and what happened subsequently, the year subsequently, they got to learn about handing out these trade protection and no move clauses like to everybody, anybody and everybody. Like, okay, I get it that you did it when you signed Panarin as a free agent. I get it that you did it with Igor. And maybe you got to do, some half protection or whatever for some of these other star players. Okay. Everybody. Adam, Adam Fox, sure. Will Borgen? Oh, come on. Anyway, that's another digressing from Cerny here. So anyway, and Adam Fox was reportedly in there as well. And they said, listen, who here Or, or do you have trade protection? You have a no move clause. Do you want to be a part of this? We're not sure how long it's going to take. Do you want us to explore making moves with you? Talk to other teams, let them know you're available. And supposedly, all of those players want to stay. Or, like I would believe in Mika Zibanejad's case, he's not going to help you out. If you come running to him now and say, oh man, we can get X, Y, Z. Will you take that trade to Columbus, Mika? Or whatever. He's not doing it. He's not doing it. At least right now. We'll see what happens during the summer. If guys' minds change or thoughts change. But right now, Mika, none of those guys want to leave. They're going to stay. So that shrinks what the Rangers can do. Now they can listen on everybody, and they must listen to everybody, on their roster. Everybody. I made the example of Igor before, he's not going anywhere. But if somebody, says, man, we would give you blah, 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 blah for Adam Fox, Rangers have to listen. You're not soliciting the trade offers, but you need to know. And if something is just so crazy over the top, man, go to that guy, go to Mika, go to Fox. Maybe a bad example, but go to this guy and see. Listen, we're in a position where we really need to move you. Would you accept the trade to so-and-so? But beyond all that, assuming that before this trade deadline, March 6th, that the Rangers, of those guys that have trade protection, really are only going to be able to deal Panarin, and then, of course, be able to deal Susie as well, pending unrestricted free agent. To make this roster retool what Chris Drury and company need to make it, Vincent Trocheck, Braden Schneider, Alexis Lafreniere. Those are the three key guys. Now, listen, I think you still listen on Gabe Perreault, for example. You don't say no if somebody's going to blow you out of the water. I don't think they're going to actively look to move him. He's a controllable asset, good young player, first-round pick. You've been waiting, a couple years now to have him in the NHL with your team. He should be part of the core that you're going to build around moving forward. But if somebody blows you out of the water, guess what? Hey, Gabe, listen, it was nice, but boy, we can fill this hole with these really good young players, and they got to be good young players. Remember, cycle back to before what I said at the beginning. Young, fast, tenacious, skilled, willing to play north-south, 200-foot games as best as to their ability. That's what the Rangers need. They need guys that are young, good young NHL players, or right on the cusp of making the NHL. They don't need 1,000 more draft picks. They did that. Talk about learning from what you did in the first retool back in 2018. They stockpiled draft picks. Then listen, they also made some shrewd moves. They got Ryan Lindgren in the Rick Nash trade with Boston. That worked out nicely. So, there are cases where they made some, where they got picks, but they got NHL players too. Lindgren was here for a number of years, 5-6 years or whatever. Top pair defenseman for a while. Anyway, so the point being here, though, is for the Rangers to make a serious impact and seriously turn this roster over, outside of Artemi Panarin, who may not be able to bring back as big a haul as you believe, especially if he tells the Rangers, I'll only waive my no move clause for this team and that team. If we're only talking about 1, 2, 3 teams, good luck, Chris Drury. Those teams have you over a barrel then, right? So now, you're catering to Panarin. You're trying to get back a decent return, but yet your hands are somewhat tied. Well, they're less tied with Vincent Trocheck, and they're certainly less tied with Alexis Lafreniere and Braden Schneider. Now, that is not Cerny saying you must trade all of these guys. But you put it out there, and teams are knocking on the Rangers' door. Come on. GMs are picking up the cell phone and saying, hey, Drew, listen, I saw your letter the other day. And what do you want? What do you want? What do you need to get for Alexis Lafreniere? What do you need to get for Braden Schneider? That's called doing your job, Chris Jury. You take those phone calls, you solicit phone calls. You make some of your own as well. Because to make this roster retool count, it's got to be more than just trading Artemi Panarin and Carson Susie. That's not enough. Not nearly enough. You won't get nearly enough in return not to have this retool and that letter 2.0 blow up in your face. So who does it start with? It starts with Vinny Trocheck. I am not a huge advocate of moving on from Trocheck. However, in this situation, I believe that you could conceivably get more back in return for Vincent Trocheck than anybody we mentioned. Panarin, Lafreniere, Schneider. I think your biggest return would be for Vinny Trocheck. 32 years old, makes what, $5.5 million a year. So that's 3 years to go on his contract. So from a Ranger point of view, you're like, boy, once we're a real playoff contender again, Troch is going to be what, 34, 35. But he can help us speed up that reset that we talk about if we trade him now, because his value to other teams, to a serious Stanley Cup contender, Vinny Trocheck, solid two-way player, couple-time NHL All-Star, good offensively, solid defensively, plays the right way, team leader, terrific on faceoffs, one of the best in the NHL, penalty killer, power play guy, on a Stanley Cup contender, like a real legit Stanley Cup contender. You take him at $5.5 million a year, and that's if the Rangers don't even retain salary. If it's $5.5 million a year, you get that guy, you insert him into your lineup, probably as a third line center, meaning that, you have two really good ones ahead of him. Like, I'm just making up an example. Take Colorado. McKinnon, Brock Nelson, Vincent Trocheck. Or Florida Panthers, assuming Barkov comes back, right? Barkov, Lundell, Trocheck. Or Barkov, Trocheck, Lundell. Because Vinny's been a top 6 guy here, playing on the top 2 lines. But that's the guy. That could be the key to this entire retool. Listen, if you hit a home run somehow with Artemi Panarin in your return, God bless you. But I don't think you can count on that. I think there are too many factors weighing in there that the Rangers won't get a massive haul for Panarin. We'll see, but I don't think you can count on it. But I do believe, because you don't have to trade Vinny Trocheck. If you don't like the return, it's not like, his salary is crushing us and he's old and he's not producing. He's not good anymore. No, man. If you don't get what you want for Vinny Trocheck now, you hold on to him. I mean, he's a team leader. He's a key guy, plays every situation. And he still has 3 years left on his contract. So guess what? You could re-engage the market during the offseason. You can re-engage the market again ahead of the next trade deadline in 2027. No pressure to trade Vinny Trocheck, but if it's there, like if you can crush it and you can bring back young NHL talent or just ready to crack into the NHL talent, into the NHL lineup, as well as probably get, a decent pick in there. That's the guy. That's the haul I want to see if the Rangers trade Vinny Trocheck. And again, there's less pressure. Like Panarin, everybody knows Rangers have to trade Panarin. Trocheck, no, we love the guy. Like, I really believe that. I think the Rangers love him. I think it would really pain Chris Drury and Mike Sullivan to see Trocheck go. But if this is all about the greater cause and retooling the roster as best we can, and we have so many holes to fill, depth-wise and skill-wise, we want to get younger. That's the key. Vinny Trocheck is the key. And then there's Schneider and Lafreniere. Schneider, rumors popping up. Teams have always been interested in him, having somewhat of a down year. And that is a little bit of the issue here with both Schneider and Lafreniere. You're not trading them at their top value. We've talked ad nauseum about how Alexis Lafreniere hasn't lived up to who we all thought he was going to be, or even live up to what he did in 23-24. 28 goals, 57 points. He hasn't been that guy since. But he's still 24. He has value around the league. That's a manageable salary cap for a top six guy. Salary cap hit, what is it? 7 point something million. But again, listen in on Lafreniere. You won't be trading, it's not going to be dollar for dollar, in value. But, you think about that Buffalo-Ottawa trade last year, Josh Norris for Dylan Cousins. Maybe there's a similar equivalent type trade that you can make for Alexis Lafreniere. As for Schneider, what makes me think that Schneider could be traded now, could happen in the summer too. And yes, we know hasn't gone great for him on the top line, top pair with Gavrikov, with Fox out. Okay. He'd been sheltered. Maybe there's a reason why he was so sheltered the past few years, in the third pair. Okay. There are a lot of teams still interested in a 24-year-old right shot defenseman, former first-round pick, and a guy that's been an NHL regular for years. Physical player, maybe not reaching what we thought he was going to be offensively. And yeah, struggling this year. But, maybe on a second pair. Maybe that's his ceiling. He can play right side, left side. There are a lot of reasons for the Rangers to keep him. There are a lot of reasons for other teams to be interested in him. Even when he's been a bit exposed this season. Schneider is a guy that I think he can get a decent return for as well. But the interest or the consideration of trading him reminds me a lot of Keandre Miller last year. You talk about, guys polarizing. He was a top four defenseman pretty much his entire time on Broadway. Former first-round pick, guy with certainly better offensive numbers and more offensive upside than Braden Schneider. A guy that was trusted with heavier, more important minutes than Braden Schneider was early in his career. But had taken a turn back his final two seasons on Broadway. And then he was a pending restricted free agent with arbitration rights, facing UFA status the following year. This was heading into last offseason. So the Rangers had a big decision to make, right? Either we're going in on this guy, we're going to give him sizable raise, and he's going to be with us for the next, 7, 8, 9 years, or under contract at least to us for that long. Or let's see what's out there. We can move on from this guy. Because remember, here's me going off on a tangent again. Remember, this retooling, resetting, redoing, re-whatevering of the roster, it just isn't starting now. I mean, it started more than a year ago. Now, a lot of it was for the reasons, salary cap reasons. They were trying to shed salary to give themselves some maneuverability, but they were also trying to clean out, some underachieving players, some guys that weren't worth what they were being paid, other guys that didn't quite get to the level they expected. I mean, go through the list: Trouba and Gaudreau, Kakko and Hedel, and then it ended up being last summer Miller and Kreider. A lot of guys. Lindgren got moved. He was a pending UFA, so, he got moved. Well, Schneider's in a similar boat now as Miller. First round pick, defenseman, not quite living up to what they expected, but hey, there's value for him out there. So this summer, he's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights, so he's going to get pretty sizable raise. The difference between him and Miller is he's 2 years removed from unrestricted free agency, but you're getting to that point where you need to decide about Braden Schneider's future. We going to invest in him long term, or we got enough questions about him that if somebody says, hey, here are a couple guys that can play at the NHL level and a draft pick or what have you, whatever the example is, there you go, right? You got to seriously consider that. If you want to turn over your roster, like the Rangers say they want to turn it over, retool, that's it. That a guy like Schneider helps you get there. Now, do you a 1-for-1 trade? Man, unless you love that other player and he's also a younger player like Schneider, I don't know. I don't know about getting one piece back. You probably have to fill multiple holes if you're going to move a younger guy like that. Or Lafreniere, using him as an example. Untouchables. I know Pat Pickens wrote a story about untouchables on the Rangers roster the other day. Igor. I mean, you got your no move guys with no move clauses. Though arguably they're untouchable because of their clauses, not because you wouldn't move them. You would move. You trade Mika. He's going to be 33 next year. His contract runs until he's like 90. Slight exaggeration. JT Miller, same thing. He'll be 33. He's here forever, on his contract. It's not going to age well, with him. But okay, if those guys are untouchable for those reasons, it's still possible that you can maybe meet with them more in the offseason. I don't think it's something you can do now during the season. But in the offseason, you talk to them about, what the future looks like, what the landscape is. Maybe even let them know. I mean, less so Miller because he's your captain, I guess. You traded for him. You made a big trade for him. Okay. But Mika, if you want to try and cash in on his, resurgent season this year, you be honest about it. We're looking to move you, Mika. Would you move your no trade or your no move clause? Would you waive it? So to me, that doesn't make him an untouchable. If he said, I'm not going anywhere, I'll never will I waive that no move clause. Okay, yeah, well, it makes him technically untouchable. But if you're talking about their importance to the team, Igor Shesterkin's probably your only untouchable, maybe Adam Fox. And by the way, Igor, if you had any question how important he is to this team, you have not been paying attention since he went down with that lower body injury. You have not paid attention. The Rangers were not a great team with Igor. A lot of warts, a lot of giveaways, a lot of sloppy play. that he cleans up. You take it for granted. He's out. He's out of the lineup, and it's all cratered, right? I think the overall team confidence and certainly the results in goal. God bless Jonathan Quick. He's a future Hall of Famer, winningest United States-born goalie in NHL history. Great leader, 3-time Stanley Cup champion. I can't say enough great things about him. But boy, does it look like it's the end for him, right? Just being brutally honest. Yeah, when the Rangers sheltered him and he played once every 6 days, he was fantastic at the start of the year. Then he started to level off. And then the Rangers really needed him when Igor went down. Forget it. Right? Forget it. He's just not that guy anymore. Turned 40 the other day. Again, God bless him. And I think he still has value to that team as their backup goalie and in the locker room as a leader, an important, respected voice. I mean, the guys love him. But Igor's out. You wonder why he's making the money he's making? And you ever doubted that he wasn't the answer, the guy that's going to, just cover up all their mistakes or most of their mistakes? Now you know, right? Pay attention. Watch the team. Watch the absolute cratering that's taken place since Igor went out. So untouchable. First his contract, but also this is not a guy. This is not a bedrock piece that you're looking to move. So anyway, a lot of thoughts from me there. I still a lot of things going around in my head to talk about, but more importantly, we're going to find out what Dave Pagnotta thinks. He's from the fourth period, super well connected as we talked about throughout the league. So we're going to talk about the Rangers' strategy moving forward, what some of the trade rumors are, what's the short range plan and goal, and what's the longer range plan and goal. We'll do all of that when we return with Dave Pagnotta of the fourth period right here on the Rink Rap podcast. Welcome back to Rink Rap at Forever Blueshirts. I am Jim Cerny, really pleased to welcome on Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period. And as we were just joking before he joined us, a guy that does not get enough face time, especially this time of year. You turn left, you turn right, he's there. So thanks for squeezing us in today. Appreciate it.
No, my pleasure, buddy. It's there's a lot going on. I don't know if how things are over there, but there's a lot going on.
Trust me, there's a lot going on. And I know you were flying around. You're with the Rangers, right? Out in LA. I don't know if you went to the Anaheim game as well, but yeah. So you've been around.
I was at the game in LA on Tuesday. I'm back in Toronto now. Got back last night straight to the Leafs-Detroit game. But yeah, I got a glimpse of them. I think this was only the second time that I've seen them in person this season. So I got a glimpse of them, and it sounds like it looks like they could use a little bit of work.
And you didn't even see the worst of it. It wasn't so bad in LA, right? But wasn't even the worst of it. But let's start here, because now they're in Northern California. They've got the Sharks close out their road trip. More importantly, as you just reported, and I was going to lead with this guy anyway, because I think he's so intriguing ahead of the deadline, that perhaps the San Jose Sharks might be taking a real close look at Braden Schneider. Fill us in.
Yeah, he was a player that they actually poked around on last season, either last season towards the deadline or in the summer. But he's a player that they've had a little bit of interest in going back to then. So, circling back now, Mike Grier is listening on all of his pending unrestricted free agent defensemen, and at the same time trying to find other ways and other outlets to bring in some guys that are in their mid to early 20s, primarily, that are going to help shore up this blue line moving forward for San Jose. So the Sharks are in certainly a playoff type mode right now, mentality, but they're also understanding that they've got some pieces on the back end that can bring back value, that they could perhaps package and flip in order to get some pieces that provide more stability on that back end that they can help grow with the rest of the core. So yeah, Schneider is somebody on their radar. We know a few other teams have been poking around before. We certainly know Vancouver's had interest in the past. Now, yeah, Schneider's not having the best of seasons, but neither is the entire team for the most part. So, can't lay that exclusively on him. Although would be nice if he upped his performance, I'm sure. But this is a player that San Jose, again, had interest in, has poked around again, and we'll see if it comes to something here either before the Olympic break or before the trade deadline.
So the reason why I wanted to lead with Schneider, even before you're reporting that San Jose might have some interest in him, was, to me, it's a fascinating situation. Almost parallels the situation a year ago at this time with Keandre Miller. Now, Miller was a year closer to unrestricted free agent status, but Schneider can be an RFA, arbitration rights. At the end of this season, he's 2 years away from unrestricted free agency. They kind of have to make a decision sooner rather than later on Braden Schneider, just as they did with Keandre Miller. And I'm not saying they're going to go down that same route, but, he got increased responsibility this year, and it hasn't gone great. Now, maybe it was too big a leap, for him to be in the top pairing with Gavrikov, who could fill Adam Fox's shoes. I get it. But it hadn't been a great year for him. It's been a distinct step back, not unlike, even though they're different players, not unlike Keandre Miller's progression or lack thereof with the Rangers too. So just kind of your general thoughts about Schneider again, from a bigger perspective, and the Rangers' decision that they need to make on him, as I said, sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Look, sometimes when you give some of these younger defensemen immediate responsibility, like not everybody is Matthew Schaefer. Not everybody's going to dive into this and at 18 years old just be as good as he's been. Takes a little bit of time for some players, and if you're pace carring this to a certain extent and then suddenly just let the reins off, it doesn't always work out favorably, at least in the first year. It takes a little bit of time to get reacclimated or fully acclimated to the new responsibilities. Just talked about being in LA, Brant Clark. They're trying to give him a leash. They're trying to give him more time, but they don't want to do it all at once. They've reined him in a little bit. His ice time's improving. His overall game is improving, but they're trying to slow play that one a little bit, even though the fans want him off the leash. Coaching staff is trying to slow play that. Sometimes it works for the best, and sometimes you see scenarios like this where you get full responsibility, and it's going to take time to fully adjust. And I think that's part of the growing pains that Schneider's going through right now, and why a lot of people are fairly critical, fans especially, of his game this season. But again, look at the Rangers as a whole. It hasn't been obviously the best of seasons to this point. There have been guys that have been struggling up and down the lineup. Maybe a little bit more, less responsibility, but play it out a little longer sometimes benefits. We'll see kind of where that goes, obviously. And like I said, San Jose is not the only team that's going to be poking around on a guy like this. With the way that the Rangers are going, with obviously the retool letter coming out, teams are going to start trying to pluck guys away, from this team. The vultures are going to be coming in. San Jose likes him. I'm sure other teams do as well. We know Vancouver has in the past, as I mentioned. So we'll see kind of where this goes. And to your point, with respect to Keandre Miller, this doesn't have to happen before the trade deadline. This could still be something that occurs in the offseason, which is what we saw with them in Carolina last year.
And which brings me to another point that I'm sure Chris Drury wants to get as much business done as he can before the deadline, because I don't think he likes having this crap hang over his head.
Yeah.
And let's right. Drew's not that kind of guy, but this quote unquote retool really started, like, he foresaw that this roster, this core needed work, more than a year ago. Barclay Goodrow, Jacob Trouba, Chris Kreider, Keandre Miller, Hedl, Kakko, we go down the whole list of guys. So this isn't something new that he's been working on or thinking about. So I get the sense that, boy, he'd really like to retool, not rebuild, retool as quickly as he can. But I agree with you. I think that a lot of this bleeds into the summer. I don't think it all gets done before the deadline. Panarin has to, of course.
Yes.
But I think Schneider, Lafreniere, they still have time, decision-making time for some of these guys. And they may come to the point too. Mika Zibanejad may want to stay now, but maybe when he gets into the throes of this is what the roster looks like, maybe he changes his mind too. So I guess just kind of building into your point there about the summer, talk a little bit about that and how you may see it develop or it more end up that way than just at the March 6th trade deadline.
Yeah, look, a lot of teams, obviously, will go through or lead up to the trade deadline, going through some business and getting things done. The other aspect of this is just laying the foundational groundwork towards potential future deals. Some deals, when you're up against a deadline, can happen like this. Most deals take time. And especially when you're talking about more significant players, you mentioned Alexis Lafreniere, whether it's him, whether it's Schneider, whether it's other pieces on this roster, Mika, whomever, that can take some time. Those caliber players, sometimes it takes 6 months, 12 months, year and a half, before, you realize exactly what needs to be done and you start pulling the trigger on things. And obviously, roster changes, other elements come into play the longer this progresses. And sometimes that helps to manufacture these deals. So laying groundwork now to potentially have something done in the summer, or around the draft or into July after the free agent window closes, because everybody's kind of signed and you're left seeing what you have and what you don't have. So you have to go the trade route. And by the way, I think we're going to be seeing more of that trade activity just because of how shallow the free agent pool is this summer, is going to continue to be and will be, kind of moving forward. But laying groundwork now for potential deals in June around the draft in Buffalo and into July, a lot of teams go through that. And I think that's going to be something that Chris Drury and company are going to look to do. Get some business done now before the Olympic break, ideally. If not, you've got that 12-day window after the break ends until the trade deadline, to do more moves and then continue those conversations into the summer when it's time to activate again. To your point earlier, I think we're going to be seeing, obviously, a few changes, which is what they'd like to do, hence the whole Retool letter, to put everybody on notice. But I think this is going to be an interesting scenario to see how they retool and how quickly they feel they can retool before they get back into it. I mean, I'm guessing next season they're expecting to be a little wonky. So this might be another year before they really get to where they want to be. But, the owner preached patience. We'll see how much patience they actually have. His name has been out there, and there have been exploratory conversations with other teams going back to last summer. There was a little bit of a connection there with Vancouver when the whole Quinn Hughes discussion was happening league-wide. People trying to connect dots, his former agents, the AGM in Vancouver, maybe that makes sense and this and that. But there was some conversation at some point, that involved him. I think there's an appetite to explore it. This isn't Panarin. This isn't them trying to get rid of him. And I don't mean get rid of making him available, shopping him specifically. But there is a willingness to have those conversations. I think there's a willingness to have the conversations with a lot of people on this team, including guys with the no trade and no movement. I know the message recently, or at least this week, has been, we don't want to move him, but we may have to, or, we'll listen and this and that. But I think it's genuine in terms of listening. With Lafreniere, he's got his contract. He's not produced at the level that they anticipated that he would this season. They thought the incline would be happening well in advance of now. Does a change of scenery make sense? And what are you getting back? Because if you're moving this player, who really started the last letter, it started with him. They got first overall pick. They drafted him. Everything was brighter. Panarin entered the mix and so on. But you've got to be able to move out him and bring in star talent coming back. This isn't a scenario where you're moving Lafreniere and you're bringing back a package to come back. This has to be a scenario, a player of his caliber, or at least optically his character, his play, his performance, what he brings to the table, that has to be matched with what's coming back. So if optically you're moving out a star player, you've got to bring in a star player. And that's what presents some challenges because, obviously his value isn't the highest, even though the potential, there's still a lot of people around the league that still believe he's got a lot of potential left in him. And it's still very, very early in his career. So there's a runway here for this player. But at the same time, the value isn't at its peak anywhere near that. So it's a tough path to kind of navigate right now in terms of trying to get back a deal that makes you better. For other players that are out there, obviously Panarin and Susie, and look, Vinny Trocheck's going to be, he is on the radars of a lot of teams. There are teams that are looking at him going, they've either started the conversation or plan to have those conversations with him. And there are teams that have that void, whether it's Minnesota or LA or Winnipeg or, whomever else. Now he has some no trade protection, but this is a guy that I think from a value perspective and a tradable value perspective, he's probably at the top of the list for them to maximize a return. They've got to figure out if they can do that, be it in the next 2 weeks or ahead of the deadline.
Yeah, I think the point you make a lot of good points there. Certainly, I agree about Trocheck. To me, he's the guy that probably can bring you back the biggest haul for many, many different reasons. Of course, it's a significant hole you're going to create as well. But I really believe that they need to backfill with talent right here. It can't just be about draft picks. It can't be about. They did the route of, we've got 3 draft picks this year. We've got 2 draft picks this year. That was kind of the focus of the first retool. And they didn't draft well. They didn't develop well. And they had some bad luck. They didn't have Matthew Schaefer or Macklin Celebrini when they had the top overall pick. It was Lafreniere, a good player, not a generational player. That's luck of the draw. You get number 2 overall pick, not number 1 overall. It's Kakko. It's not Hughes,
Right.
But that said, there was so much focus on stockpiling the draft picks because they had traded away so many in those years of the 2010s. Now I think the mindset's got to be, we need NHL-ready players. We need guys to step in now because the depth here, the drop off from your top line, and your top defensive pair, then on through, and obviously going down to the minors and the prospects and all that. I mean, the depth drop off is massive with this team right now. The amount of guys, talented guys that they need to infuse into this lineup with speed. So youth, speed, and be able to play in the NHL now. To me, that's what they most need more than, we've got 3 draft picks this year.
Right.
That's important, but I think this is more important. So I'm just curious if you see it that way as well.
Yeah. So teams that are going through this, a retool versus a rebuild, a full-on rebuild, and then those that are coming out of their rebuild, that are starting to take the next steps, that still have pieces that they're willing to move out, they're not necessarily geared towards first-round pick, second-round pick, third-round pick. They want to have what you were describing. They want to have NHL caliber or on the cusp of becoming NHL caliber talent. So in cases like Trocheck, in cases like even Panarin, because he's on an expiring deal, you're probably going to see the more traditional rental approach or rental return, unless there's going to be an extension tied to this, which seems unlikely right now, but certainly possible. So you're probably looking at, and just from a value-wise perspective, first-round pick, top prospect, another asset. Now, is it first-round pick equivalent? Is it 2 top prospects and a third-round pick, for example, or another piece? Like, all of those can be changed and shifted and augmented and whatnot based on perceived value that the Rangers have. And the same thing can be said for a Trocheck. The same thing can be said for Schneider, for anybody else that they end up moving. Some guys might go for picks just because that's where the value is, but the top-tier guys, if you can get somebody who is in first year of the A or second year of the A and has played a couple games in the show, then, if the pathway to becoming an everyday NHL player is shorter, that's the direction that a lot of teams nowadays that are going through these retools, or again, as I mentioned, they're in the next phase of their rebuild. That's what they like to go after. So for teams like the Rangers that are doing this, I think you're taking a model that is similar to what the Vancouver Canucks got from Minnesota for Quinn Hughes. Not comparing the talent from Quinn Hughes to some of these guys, just saying the model of that deal was NHL caliber or ready guys now. And yeah, they got an extra first round pick out of it. But, Marco Rossi, NHL player, hurt right now, but whatever. William, going to be a great player, but NHL ready now. They've got, those are the key pieces. So whether it's the Rangers or other teams in this mold, they're going to use that as a bit of, the manual to what they want to bring back. And look, at the end of the day, the other team has to be willing to do that. And they may have to take first round pick of this and that, but then you utilize those assets, you flip them to bring back what you're looking for. But at the end of the day, I think you're bang on when you're going through these retools. You don't want this to be a 3, 4, 5 year process. You want this to be 18 months, really going in like the end of this season, next season, you continue, following season, you start riding in the right direction. And I think that's what this is probably going to look like.
Right. Okay. Real quick. Last one. I know we've kept you a while. Dave Pagnotta, the fourth period. Appreciate it. Squeezing us into your schedule here today.
Of course.
Just last one. And you touch on Panarin, what you think the likely return is. Any intel? I know you were out there in LA. You were around them for, at least that day. Any intel you're hearing from around the league where he might end up? Any word leaking out of where he might accept a trade to with that ironclad no move clause he's got?
Yeah, I give him and his agent, Paul Theophanos, a lot of credit because they do a really good job in just tight-lipping the crap out of this. Always, even when he's dealing with his guys. He also represents Kaprizov, and nobody anticipated that level of deal happening when things were going on. Just the usual suspects at this point. Now, I think it's going to be a point where they're going to narrow down the list. Now, I would be a little bit surprised right now. And there's still runway. There's still just under 2 weeks until the roster freeze for the Olympics. I'd be a little bit surprised if it happens now, but at the same time, it's perfect timing because, this is a player that can come into his new environment. Everybody's gone until the 16th after the freeze, and then the 17th teams report back who aren't at the Olympics. Gives you that extra time frame before the season returns on the 25th. To get fully acclimated with your team, your new surroundings and everything. I think perfect scenario is to get this done by the Olympic freeze. I just haven't heard that there's been enough, at least now, or maybe they're just doing a hell of a job, but at least now just keeping it quiet. So I don't know if right now is the right time. This may be something that happens after Olympics, but I think ideally, perfect scenario, this happens in the next 2 weeks before the freeze. For all the reasons I described, for giving him and everyone around him opportunity to be ease into his new environment versus just thrown into the fire. So we'll see how that develops. But usual suspects right now in terms of speculative teams, whether it's the Caps, the Wild, the Panthers, which I don't know how they kind of pull that off. Yeah. The other thing I should note for any team that happens, I believe there is almost a mandate that the Rangers are going to retain on this contract. How much? Right. We'll see. Half of what he's making now makes it a lot more palatable for teams. There's a cost associated with that. And I think because he's on an expiring deal, that if the right deal is there, at least talking to a few other teams, that they'd be willing to go in this direction to eat up to half of that deal. And that would make things a little bit easier for some clubs.
Right. Sounds good. Dave Pagnotta, the fourth period. Thanks for joining us. A lot to break down. I'm sure there's going to be a lot ahead, and hopefully we can chat again soon down the road and see, kind of analyze what was done or what's coming up this summer or where they're headed. But certainly we'll be following you at the fourth period and on social media, and of course all your other appearances, Sirius XM as well with DB.
Yeah.
Thanks for a few minutes today.
You got it, buddy. Thanks for having me.